Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about summer vacations in Appalachia. Sometimes, the trip went much darker than we expected. But before we begin, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. I'm 31. I've been burning out for months, and I needed a break so badly it was dumb. I wanted raw quiet, nothing familiar. Somewhere so remote I couldn't even text my mom. I stumbled on that rental deep in some off-grid listing site, maybe 5 pages in. The photos were grainy but promising. A little timber-framed cottage, wide porch, slanted tin roof, perched solo on a hill. It was described as rustic, remote, and cell signal free. The price was absurdly low. I guessed mold, bats, maybe structural collapse, whatever. About 10 days. The owner's name was Marin. It showed on the booking, and on a note inside, a welcome message stuck to the fridge. Help yourself, Marin. That was all. No clear check-in, no instructions. I never met her, never heard from her again. The drive up was longer than I expected. The map showed a rough road, but in person it felt like slipping back in time. It started smooth, then narrowed to one lane. Then gravel, then dirt that might as well have been a hiking path with tire ruts. Branches scratched the sides. I crawled around a sharp bend, then the woods cleared, and there it stood, like someone had dropped it there centuries ago. No other buildings, no neighbors, just that fading porch and a weight of quiet. There were no tire tracks in the pull-off. The grass looked trimmed once, maybe, but the effort had long stopped. I parked, heart pounding with relief and alarm. The first night was oddly peaceful. I unpacked, popped open a beer, and sat on the porch. The windows groaned, wood settling, age whispering. I stared into nothing. No lights on any hill. No blow of towns. Just frogs below and an occasional breeze that shifted leaves. My phone was dead. No notifications came in. It was the kind of silence that doesn't just settle, it sinks. The next morning, curious, I spotted a narrow dirt path behind the house. You could see it from the porch. Just a shallow depression like a forgotten trail. I followed it. Trees closed in. 10 minutes later, it opened to a rocky shelf overlooking the valley. Hidden, clear, peaceful. I brought a book and sat until dusk. Everything felt still. Too still. When I turned to head back, the path looked different. No landmarks. The trees uniform, shadows blending together. I marked a mossy rock. Lightly, just in case. On the third day, I stepped out with coffee and froze. The red chair, one of 2 wicker chairs from the porch, was in the middle of that trail, dead center. It faced away from the house. I remembered sitting in it but not carrying it there. Morning brain, maybe. I moved it back. Under the table. Day 4. Same spot. Same position. Same lack of explanation. No tracks leading to it. No disturbance in the dirt. I didn't touch it. I left it, walked down to the creek. When I came back, it was gone. The porch stood empty. Odd, but I shrugged. Day 5, the path seemed to shift. I recognized subtle changes. The mossy stump was gone. A forked tree looked healed, like the split had fused into one trunk. Another tree had a new scar. Panic flared, sharp and irrational. I tried to mark it again. Stone stacks, carved bark, twine tied to a branch. I walked away, came back. The markers were gone. The bark smooth. Stone piles scattered or leveled, as if by an unseen hand. That night, I heard something by the car. Quiet crunching on gravel. Precise. Measured. I flicked off the kitchen light and pressed against the curtain. Then I saw it. The red chair. Again, sitting on the path. This time it faced the house. Like it had decided to watch me. I barely slept. I lay in the dark, tracking time in my head. Day 6, I gave in to instinct. I packed a tiny bag, just food, the basics, and decided to go. Town, gas station, anyone human. I reached the old road and it was gone. No track, no bends, just a wall of trees. I got out, pushed through, branches fresh, grass untouched. I looked back, no tire marks. My car sat in a forest clearing like it had been dropped there. My chest went tight. No music, no phone. I just sat, then backed the car near the porch and shut it off, and sat some more. That night I turned on every light. Kitchen, porch lamp, bedroom, locked everything, pretended it meant safety. Around 2:16 a.m., bang, they all shut off. No flicker, no warning, just instant blackout. My heart pounded. I crept barefoot into the living room. The front door stood ajar, 3 inches, no wind, no force, just open. I froze. 5 minutes. Then I shut it, locked it, stayed awake until the gray of morning stretched across the floor. Day 7, I walked to the creek expecting relief. Instead, there it was, the red chair, standing upright in the water, not submerged, not wet, still pristine. Watching me, or so it felt. I didn't approach. I turned back, trudged uphill. That evening I found pages from my book scattered across the yard, neat piles, each with a pebble to hold them. Some were mine, underlined, annotated, others were blank, new. I gathered them quickly and carried them inside, without light. I sat on the porch with knees drawn up, listening. After midnight, I heard it. A knock at the side window. Sharp. Once. Then a knock at the back door. Once. Then 2 knocks at the bedroom window. My skin went numb. I stayed still. Waited. Nothing more came. Morning arrived with brittle clarity. I walked back to the trail. It was normal again. The forest flowed into the road the way it should. The red chair was gone. Every summer, my cousin Wren and I would spend a couple weeks with Aunt Lorna at her cabin out in Kilauea Hollow. I say cabin, but that's being generous. It was this old slumped thing on the edge of a ridge where the trees grew too close and nothing quite felt level. The porch leaned so hard you could set a marble down and watch it roll off the side. Everything smelled like damp sweaters and stale wood. The place had no signal, no TV that worked, and exactly 1 chair that didn't squeak like it was haunted. We loved it. It meant no parents, no school, no real responsibilities. Just a map of the hills, a stack of old comic books, a creaky canoe, and a bunch of freedom we didn't totally know what to do with. Aunt Lorna gave us just enough warning each year to keep things interesting. Don't go wandering past the ridges, she'd say. Or, if you hear something strange, pretend you didn't. We'd nod, promise not to do anything dumb, then immediately make a list of all the things we wanted to do that probably counted as dumb. That summer started out exactly like the others. We pitched our tent beside the cabin, ran an extension cord out for the 1 flashlight we liked to keep charging, and swore off the indoors like purists. Sleeping bags under the tarp, ramen on the fire. No rules except, don't be the first one to complain about bugs. First night, right around midnight, we both heard it. Steps. Not shuffling, not rustling. Footsteps. Slow, heavy ones, crunching through pine needles just outside our tent. At first we froze. You know that kind of stillness where you're not even blinking? That was us. Wren sat up, mouthed something I couldn't see in the dark. I remember holding my breath, waiting for it to just be a deer. But it kept going. In this steady pattern. 4 steps, stop. 4 steps, stop. Like it was pacing, deliberate. I unzipped the side of the tarp just a little, expecting maybe a bear or some raccoons. It was a man. Barefoot, shirtless, mid-40s maybe. Pale, like he hadn't seen daylight in years. He was walking a tight square around the cold fire pit we'd made that evening. Same path, over and over. His eyes didn't move. His hands twitched slightly with each turn like he was trying to count something invisible, and his mouth was moving. Silent, but definitely saying something. I pulled back and whispered, "Wren, there's someone out there." He leaned in, looked, and I saw his face shift just a little. Like something clicked into place, and he suddenly wasn't curious anymore. Just tense. He just said my name, Wren whispered. I didn't hear anything. I told him that. No, he said, firmer. He whispered it. Right at us. I looked again, but the man was already turning back into the trees. No urgency. Just disappeared into the black, like it was his yard and we were the weird ones. Next morning, we told Aunt Lorna. She was making coffee and frying something unidentifiable in a pan. You'll see all kinds out here, she said. Not even turning around. There's drunks, old miners, wanderers who don't know what year it is. If he didn't knock, he wasn't your problem. That's how she was. Calm to the point of making you question your own instincts. Wren and I exchanged looks, but we dropped it. That afternoon, we decided to hike one of the ridges we usually avoided. Mostly because it was steep, but partly because we'd always been told it led nowhere worth going. Seemed like a good time to test that. About halfway up, we found a path. Narrow, but definitely carved. It was a kind of trail you wouldn't notice unless you were looking, like something trying to stay hidden. Ever seen this before? I asked. Wren shook his head. Nah. You think it goes to that old stone chimney she talked about once? The one that burned? I shrugged. Only one way to find out. We walked. The deeper we got, the quieter it became. No birds, no bugs. Just the crunch of underbrush and our own breath. Even our voices felt out of place, like sound didn't carry right out there. Eventually we stepped into a clearing. Right in the center was a huge dead tree stump, cracked down the middle like it had been split by lightning. All around it were these little piles of stones, dozens of them. Same size, same shape, each one exactly 3 stones high, balanced, perfect. "Are these graves?" I asked. "Or offerings?" Ren said, stepping closer. He reached a hand out toward one of the piles. "Don't," I said, sharper than I meant to. He paused, dropped his hand. We didn't say anything else, just stood there, staring at those stacks like they were watching us back. The air felt off, thin, almost electric. It reminded me of that stillness before a thunderstorm, but worse. Like the trees were holding their breath. We left without touching anything. That night, Ren was restless. He kept rubbing his hands together like they were dirty, whispering to himself. I asked what was wrong. He said, "It's in my head." "What is?" He didn't answer, just turned over and curled tighter into his bag. Sometime after 2, I woke up. His bag was empty. I bolted out of the tent, barefoot, heart thudding so loud I thought it might wake the woods. Cabin door was shut, porch light off, no sign of him inside. Then I saw something move past the trees. I followed. The clearing looked exactly the same. Same stump, same stones. But now Ren was in the middle of it, walking the exact square the man had walked the night before. Same twitching fingers, same empty eyes. I called his name. Nothing. I ran in and grabbed his arm. His skin was ice cold, like he'd been lying in snow. He looked at me slowly, mouth twitching. Then he whispered, 3 stones, 3 stones, 3 stones. I pulled it back through the trees. He didn't resist, but it was like dragging someone sleepwalking, heavy, limp, detached. Back at the tent, he climbed into a sleeping bag and went silent. In the morning, he didn't remember a thing, just asked if we had any cereal. I told Aunt Lorna everything. She stirred her coffee so long the spoon started tapping the side like a clock. "You saw the piles?" she finally asked. "Yeah." "You didn't touch them?" "No." "Good," she said. "They're not yours." "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. We slept inside that night. Neither of us argued. I woke up around 3 to a scratching sound. Not inside the cabin, under it, like something dragging fingers along the beams. Then a voice. It whispered my name. Not Ren's voice, something higher, flatter, like someone had copied his tone from the woods and replayed it badly. I held my breath until it stopped. In the morning, all the salt was gone. Every box, every shaker. We checked the pantry, the junk drawer, even the emergency kits. All of it gone, except for one pile of 3 stones. Right in the center of the porch. Aunt Lorna saw it and didn't even blink. Just packed the bag, loaded us into her truck, and drove us to town. She didn't explain, just said, "I'm not chancing it." Ren didn't argue either. 2 weeks later, back at home, I woke up one night and saw him out in the backyard, barefoot, shirtless, walking those same tight squares in the grass, his hands twitching. I opened the window. "Ren," he stopped, looked up at me like he just remembered something, then walked back inside and went straight to bed. Didn't remember any of it the next morning. It's been 5 years. We don't talk about that summer anymore. I'm 27 years old. I pulled my rattling, dented sedan beneath an ancient oak that seemed to have grown crooked just to shake its branches at travelers. I sat still for what felt like long minutes, forehead pressed to the steering wheel, listening to nothing except the soft whoosh of warm air. It carried the scent of damp green things, of fern and rotting bark, of summer that hadn't moved in centuries. My bones felt tired, yet something about being still made them ache for space. No plan, no expectations, just roads that didn't appear on any map. I needed that. From the sanctuary of the car, I let myself drift into old memories. Hours spent cooped up in libraries, the hum of projectors during graduate lectures, the hollow ticking of time-stamped deadlines. I inhaled, and some of that pressure leaked out. I closed my eyes long enough to pretend none of it existed. Then I turned the ignition and drove. Country roads rolled over hills that looked more like soft breathing than geography. I passed farmhouse fences stitched thick with vines, fields that had already surrendered summer and were flirting with something cooler. I kept driving until navigation died. That's how I stumbled into this crossroads town. One of those places with a faded welcome sign that tells you nothing. The single cafe had chipped cups and a chalkboard that listed coffee as possible. The general store's sign was half-painted and hanging crooked, as though the painter had run off mid-stroke. Inside, the smell struck again, a mix of varnish, stale soda, and month-old dust stirred by no one's footsteps. At the counter stood a woman older than the store itself, her hair twisted into a bun, determined to hold itself together. I asked if she knew of any old trails, the obscure, forgotten kind. I may have added a joke, as hidden as my thesis under my desk, but her face didn't crack. She gave me a long, searching look and pulled a yellowed map from under the register. Her finger traced a faint line up a ridge towards something marked Creek Trail. She whispered, "Nobody uses it much." Then, softer still, "Be safe." It sounded like more than a polite goodbye. I left with that line stuck in my throat. That night, I slept uneasy. My mind replayed the quiet, the woman's voice, the scrub echoing in my bones. By dawn, I was awake and walking, the map in my hand, though it meant almost nothing. The forest floor was so thick with leaves, the earth felt cushioned, secret. Shadows clung to the trail as if they didn't trust the sun. I followed the sound of running water, navigating roots and protruding rock with more curiosity than confidence. Then I saw something odd. A rusted bike frame tangled in ferns, half buried in leaf mold, as if the forest had decided it was overdue for trophy status. It made no sense. No trail led to it. No branches were broken. It was just planted, a clue wrapped in silence. My chest tightened. Strange how a silent scene can feel louder than yelling. I forced myself to exhale. "Nature, you're full of surprises," I muttered, voice a little shaky. I kept going uphill. According to the map, I should have crossed a small log bridge by then. Instead, mossy stones mocked my expectations. The bridge had vanished. I kept an eye on the map, tracing lines and notes, but they held no weight against reality. I stepped back, trying to process. That's when I saw them. Footprints. My own muddy boot prints pressed into the bank. But on the other side, bare footprints, small, lightly impressed into the mud. No bigger than a child's, they vanished into the darkness of the forest. Abrupt. No signs of crossing, just these prints facing me, as though someone had paused to stare, then left. My breath caught. I looked away, part of me screaming to run. So I did. Not with ceremony, but with desperate quiet. Confidence and dignity slipping away. My boots slid on mossy roots. Branches slapped me like desperate hands. My heart jammed so loud I thought the trees could hear it. I tumbled once, scraping palms and knees, but I kept going. There was no rhyme to my direction, just a pulse pounding me forward. Voices reached me, faint, unreachable, audible ghosts. I refused to listen. After what felt like ages, I burst onto a wider path, more trodden, carved as if ancient machinery had pushed through once. I followed the groove until I rounded a curve and nearly tripped over a truck, engine humming. Parked like an anchored boat in the forest. The driver stepped out, camouflage jacket, expression flat. He watched me in silence, like I was part of a peculiar wildlife study. I could barely form words. My finger jerked backward, pointing into the trees. He finally said, "Nobody hikes out that way anymore." And that was that. No explanation needed. He gave me a ride back to town. I booked a motel. I washed under scalding water, standing there until the skin on my shoulders pruned. Later, I lay on the thin motel bed, staring at the ceiling's dim tip of light, hands still trembling. I remembered more. Deeper into that ridge, I had spotted a crisp shirt draped over a low branch, clean and out of place. 50 yards past, the backpack stood zip shut, silent. I called out, not to be heard, but to break the quiet. Nothing answered. Then I came across a second pack, torn open. Papers, wrappers, a notebook soaked through, shredded at the first page. The words I could make out were slurred into moisture. No name, no sign, just loss. Just loss. That's when my calm vanished. Fear reasserted itself. I told myself I wouldn't spend another heartbeat in the mountains that day. I didn't go back to the store the next day. The little building had disappeared. Weeds and lumpy concrete filled the space where it used to stand. I asked locals. None had ever seen a store there. None remembered. I shrugged it off. Memory is a slippery thing. I see her face sometimes, those silver-glazed eyes, that soft voice. Maybe it was a locket catching the light, or just the line of her face I remember. I don't stop when I drive on those roads. My cousin Leo talked me into spending 2 weeks of summer break with him at his family's shabby cabin, hidden deep in the Blue Ridge. He called it a break from everything. No parents, no responsibilities, just freedom and mountains between us and civilization. I pictured 2 lazy weeks of fishing, sleeping late, eating junk, and pretending we were living in a mountain magazine. It sounded like the perfect escape, and since I wasn't doing much at home, I went for it. The cabin was rustic. The porch leaned like it had lost interest. The shutters didn't shut, and the door was stubborn unless you gave it a kick at the bottom. Inside were 2 cramped rooms and a loft above, just enough space to lay out sleeping bags. The pump out back squeaked and groaned when you drew water. The tiny gas stove rattled shakily whenever we used it, like it could cough out death at any moment. But none of that fazed us. It all felt like part of the adventure. The first few days were exactly how I imagined. We bared our feet in the river until they turned numb. We roasted hot dogs while telling each other we'd just eat outside so we didn't have to do dishes. We pedaled our bikes up and down that gravel road until our legs throbbed. Nights turned into card games by flashlight, mostly bad bets and laughter when someone cheated. Then we made up ghost stories with ridiculous punchlines and dozed off to crickets that played the soundtrack of summer nights. Then, around the 4th night, things began unraveling. Not with a scream or a bang, just subtle, tiny things that gave me a stutter in my chest. We were biking downhill, wind hitting our faces like invisible fingers. Same stretch of trail we'd barreled down 3 or 4 times before. But this time, the bend appeared too soon. I'd braked so hard I white-knuckled the handlebars and my tires screeched across gravel. Leo nearly crashed behind me, and his face said he had seen it too. We didn't mention it. We glided the rest of the way down with hard stumping, saying nothing. Later that night, I brushed my teeth and stared at the crooked mirror nailed above the sink. In the half-light, I thought my reflection had shifted. My jaw looked faintly off-center. When I blinked, everything snapped back. Normal. The next morning, I stumbled out early to pump water. That heavy bucket usually took a few strong cranks to fill, but this time it felt heavy before I even lifted it. When I dumped it into the pot, a dense clump of gray ash, or something that looked like ash, slithered out. I nearly puked. I blinked, and the powder dispersed. The water looked totally clear again. I dumped it into the dirt, throat tight, and pumped fresh water. When Leo finally woke and I tried to explain, he just laughed, said maybe I was still half asleep. Easy to say, less easy to believe. That night, I lay awake in the loft. I heard low, slow footsteps creak across the floor below. Exactly how Leo's weight dragged when he got up at night. I leaned over the loft railing, ready to joke that he was sleepwalking. But then I saw him, curled up on his sleeping bag, mouth open, snoozing hard, and the footsteps kept going. Creaks and dull thuds, someone pacing the floor. They stopped after a few minutes, and the silence that followed felt so deep it roared in my ears. I didn't move until morning, muscles stiff, pulse flat. After that, weird little things piled up. We'd smashed a coffee mug on day 2, misshapen blue ceramic with a cracked handle. The next morning, that mug was back in the cupboard. Blistered handle gone, same stripes, high gloss like new. We stared at it, dumbfounded. Then there was the X I carved into a tree with my pocket knife, just a crude marker. By the next sunrise, the same exact X was etched into another tree, a couple 100 feet away. Same depth, same grain. We argued for a while about which carving came first, but memory blurred, and neither of us could be sure. One evening near the end of our first week, we climbed up to our favorite ridge. Leo loved dragging me there for the view at dusk. He said he'd never gotten lost on that trail, not once, even though it forked 3 times. On the way up, it was the same steady climb. But coming down, the trail stretched unnaturally. My legs ached as though we'd walked twice the distance. My watch said nearly an hour had passed when it should have been 30 minutes. Leo texted his dad that we'd be late, but even he looked unsettled, checking his watch in silence. That night, I finally talked about it all. The shots of time, the mug, the footsteps. I said the place felt like it was messing with reality. Leo frowned, brought up distorted perception, how isolation can make you lose sense of time, but his eyes flickered, like he wasn't convinced either. Then we stepped outside for fresh air and saw it. Someone, or something, stood at the edge of the tree line, framed between 2 thin birches, motionless. Distance too great to make out features. I called out, asked if they needed help. No reply. Leo shouted. Still nothing, not even a flicker. We backed into the cabin, bolted the door, and sat in the dark, silence so thick I could taste it in my mouth. Neither of us slept well, though both pretended we were fine. The next day, I felt sick. My stomach churned like it was being revolved by unseen hands. The air felt heavy with smell. Leo avoided mentioning the figure, the trail, anything at all. A pair of small incidents cracked our sense of safety, then piled into days that felt heavier than the weight of our packs. So, about a week in, I broached it, voice low. "We can't stay," I said. He nodded, too quiet. We couldn't pretend anymore. We agreed to leave early. On our last morning, we packed in silence. No folding, no organizing. Just shoving things into bags so we could leave quicker. Descending the trail toward the road where his dad would pick us up, we both felt the need to keep moving. Then, halfway down, we hit a split. That had never been there. Two trails, side by side. Mirror reflections. Same slope, same dead stump, same pattern of rocks. The right fork looked identical to the left, like the path had been duplicated in a glitch. My heart sank. I picked up a stone and tossed it down the right fork just to hear it bounce. Nothing, no sound. The stone vanished into silence. We didn't argue. We didn't hesitate. We turned left and started running. Down the path, stumbling over roots. Pure adrenaline. We didn't stop until we saw his dad's truck lights bobbing near the gravel road. I've never been more relieved to see headlights. I didn't go back to the Appalachians that summer, or the one after. His family sent texts, "Come anytime." But I kept saying I was busy, working extra shifts, whatever excuse I could make. The truth squeezed my chest more than any excuse. I was afraid. Afraid that if I ever went back, I might take the wrong path and never return. I grabbed my bag, climbed into the truck, and left the ridge behind me, and I kept going. My aunt was convinced I needed a proper reset before heading into my last semester of college. I must have looked more fried than I realized when I visited her in May, because she immediately launched into a plan for a quiet, off-grid summer, no distractions. Just me, nature, and time to write. She had a friend who knew someone, a typical chain of vague trust, and they offered up a cabin in the Appalachians for a few weeks. No cost. Just keep it clean and lock the door when you leave. I figured, why not? It sounded like the kind of thing I'd regret not doing. I didn't have any better plans, so I packed up my notebooks, a stack of books, and a few essentials, then headed out early one morning. My phone said the drive would take 6 hours. It took 9. The roads got strange after a while. Not bad exactly, just narrow and twisty, and quiet in that unsettling way. Nothing around for miles. I lost signal about 2 hours from the cabin. The GPS glitched, recalculated itself, then confidently declared I had arrived. But I was staring at trees. A few hundred feet back, I spotted a nearly hidden gravel path branching off the main road. No sign, no gate, no mailbox, just trees, rock, and a faint set of tire tracks disappearing into the woods. I took it. The cabin came into view after a minute. Small, sloped roof. Half-sunken porch. Paint long faded. One rocking chair out front looked like it hadn't moved in a decade. But it didn't feel spooky or abandoned, just old, real. The kind of place with spiderwebs in the corners but a faint smell of fresh cleaner inside. The door was unlocked, which weirded me out for a second, until I remembered that was the plan. No key exchange. Just let yourself in. Inside it was fine. Cozy even. Everything mismatched but clean. A humming fridge in the corner. A creaky old bed in the back room. A shelf of paperbacks in various states of decay. No TV, no Wi-Fi. My phone was now just a camera and flashlight. There was a guest book, handwritten entries going back years, most of them short and generic. Lovely place. Great escape. Thanks for the stay. No names I recognized. The first few days were exactly what I'd hoped for. Quiet mornings with coffee and writing. Afternoons walking the trails behind the cabin. Evenings reading until it got too dark to see. There were 2 main trails. One led down to a stream with cold, clear water and slick stones. The other climbed up to a ridge where you could see miles of trees in every direction. I got into the habit of timing myself, 15 minutes down, 15 back. Not because I needed to, but because it gave me structure. It became part of the rhythm. But on the 4th day, something broke the pattern. I took the same stream trail I'd walked every afternoon. Same shoes, same pace. But when I got back to the cabin, my watch said I'd been gone 40 minutes. I frowned, checked my phone, same result. I stood on the porch, staring at the trailhead. It didn't make sense. No turns, no forks. Just a dirt path, with leaves, roots, and one fallen log halfway down. I retraced it in my head, certain I'd done the same route. I even walked back down a little to check. Nothing had changed. That evening I made an omelet with the last of the eggs. I remembered cracking each one, tossing the empty carton, and washing the pan before bed. Routine. The next morning, I opened the fridge for milk, and there they were, a full carton of eggs, sealed like new, sitting on the top shelf. I laughed at first, figured I must have been wrong. Maybe I hadn't used the last of them. Maybe I'd brought 2 cartons and forgotten. But then I remembered throwing the empty one away. I checked the trash. Nothing. I turned the carton in my hands. It felt normal. Cold. I cracked one open. Definitely raw. Definitely real. I left it on the counter and stepped outside for a walk. When I came back, the egg was gone. The carton was gone. I opened the fridge. There it was again, sealed perfect in the same spot. That was the moment something shifted in my head. Before that, I could brush things off, bad memory. Off timing, too much isolation. But now it was different. I called my aunt. Hey, this might be a weird question, but does anyone check in on the place while it's rented? Like maintenance people? No, she said. No hesitation. It's private. That's why it's great. Nobody's been there in years except guests. It's just you. That night, I didn't sleep well. I left the lights on and lay there listening to the house creak in the dark. It's funny how silence feels heavier when you're waiting for it to break. Just past midnight, I heard a thud. Soft, deliberate, then another. I sat up, held my breath. Nothing. Then again, a muffled sound. Something hitting wood. Not loud enough to echo, but wrong. I got up, heart racing, checked the kitchen. Empty. Neat. Neat. But the egg carton was on the counter again. This time the lid was flipped open, and every egg was in place like they'd never been touched. The next couple of days got stranger. One morning I tripped on the porch stairs. I'd walked them a dozen times already. But now there was an extra step, lower, smaller, like it had been added overnight. I stared at it a long time, then went back inside. The next day, the step was gone, or maybe it was never there. My watch and phone started disagreeing. One said mid-morning, the other evening. The sun didn't match either. Then, hours later, they'd sync up again like nothing had happened. One afternoon, I found a sock I hadn't packed, just sitting on the bed. Gray, not mine. I left it there. The next day, it was gone. On the 7th night, I'd had enough. I packed my things, left them by the door, and planned to leave at sunrise. But sleep never came. I lay there, fully dressed, eyes on the ceiling. Then, just after midnight, I heard footsteps. Not animals, not wind. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Each one creaked the porch boards. Then the doorknob turned. Once, pause. Again, it jiggled, then stopped. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys, yanked open the door, and ran. My bags were already in the car. I started the engine and sped down the gravel path. The woods closed in on both sides. Trees too close, too tall, bent in the wrong directions. Paths branched off where there hadn't been any before. One even looked like it had a light. I didn't stop. The road dragged on, twice as long as before. My hands clenched the wheel. The car rattled over rocks like it might fall apart. Then finally pavement. A smooth strip under my tires. A road sign with a name I recognized, Civilization. I didn't stop until the sun came up. My cousins were all about budget adventures, so when Aman found this dirt-cheap cabin rental way out near Dry Hollow, he pitched it like a hidden gem. No Wi-Fi, no neighbors, pure peace, he said, as if that was a selling point. It wasn't one of those cozy, Pinterest-looking rentals you see online. This place looked like it had been slapped together with leftover lumber and wishful thinking. The porch leaned like it had already survived 2 landslides. The front steps were crooked, and the screen door wouldn't close unless you lifted it by the handle and yanked it sideways. Inside, it was even more bare bones. A couple of metal bunk beds, a dented kitchen table with mismatched chairs, and an ancient fridge that hummed like it was trying to die. No TV, no fans, not even curtains that covered the windows properly. We thought about turning back when we saw it, but nobody wanted to be the first to wimp out. The guy who met us with the key said maybe 3 words. He didn't look us in the eye. He just handed over the key, scratched his chin, and said, "Cabins used mostly in cooler months. Don't stay past a week." No smile, no explanation, just that. We waited for him to elaborate, but he climbed back in his truck and drove off like he couldn't get away fast enough. The first 2 days weren't bad. We hiked some trails, faint paths through the trees, but they looped around well enough. We grilled hot dogs on a rusted fire pit, drank cheap beer, and played cards on that wobbly table. No cell signal, but it actually felt nice to unplug. Everyone was relaxed, joking around, sleeping like rocks. Then Tuesday happened. We were out on a trail, maybe 2 hours before sunset, walking a loop we'd done the day before. I remembered it clearly, especially a little footbridge that crossed a narrow stream. It wasn't much, just old planks nailed together. I'd even tapped the railing and joked, "One wrong step and this thing's going down." We laughed and moved on. Next day, same trail, same spot, and the bridge was gone. Not broken, not collapsed, just gone. The stream was still there, same bend, same stones. But no planks, no posts, no sign a bridge had ever existed. I stood there blinking. "Wasn't there a bridge here yesterday?" I asked. Jenna squinted, shrugged. "Maybe you're thinking of a different part, but I wasn't." I could picture the trees, the bend in the trail, the light through the branches. This was the spot. They laughed it off like I was mixing things up. I laughed too, just to end it, but I thought about it all night. Around 2 a.m., I woke up thirsty. The kitchen was on the other side of the cabin, and I had to pass the porch door. It had a thin curtain that never stayed in place, so moonlight spilled through the gaps. As I walked by, I saw something move, a shape passing in front of the window. I figured it was Eli. He gets twitchy at night sometimes, used to be a smoker, so I slid the door open, planning to mess with him. The porch was empty, still, but the rocking chair was moving, slow, steady creaks, like someone had just gotten up from it. It was this ugly green thing none of us had used because it looked like it would collapse under a stiff breeze. I stood there, hand on the doorframe, watching it rock. No wind, no one there, just that creak, back and forth. Everyone inside was asleep. I checked, even tiptoed into the other room. Eli was out cold, one arm over his face, mouth open. I didn't tell anyone. Just went back to bed, pulled the covers over my head, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. In the morning, Eli asked if I'd been walking around upstairs. There was pacing, he said. Boots, heavy footsteps. Kept me up half the night. I froze. Upstairs? Yeah, he said, like it was obvious. Over my room. Nobody had been in the loft. It wasn't finished. Just warped boards and a few old boxes. We decided not to use it at all. I looked at him and said, "Wasn't me." That was it. Things got worse after that. Small stuff at first. My sneakers, which I always shoved under my cot, turned up neatly by the front door. Laces tied in perfect little bows. Jenna's phone, charging on the table, ended up in the sink an hour later, submerged, battery fried, still plugged in, dangling from the outlet like someone had tossed it in on purpose. We accused each other, but it didn't feel like a joke anymore. No one laughed. That night, we agreed we'd leave in the morning. Something felt wrong. We didn't say it out loud, but you could feel it. Everyone was tense, quiet. Then the bathroom door slammed. We were all in the living room, packing. The door banged shut like it had been kicked. We called out for Jenna. She shouted back from the kitchen. The door was locked. From the inside, Eli grabbed a screwdriver and popped it open. The light was off. The mirror was fogged, like someone had just taken a hot shower. The shower curtain was soaked, dripping onto the floor, but the tiles were dry, like the water had moved in reverse. We left the door open after that. No one wanted to go back in. At first light, we grabbed our bags and left. But when we reached the driveway, it wasn't there. The gravel path to the road was gone, just a wall of trees, thick underbrush like it had never been cleared. We stood staring. The cabin behind us looked darker, curtains drawn, windows shuttered. We'd left some lamps on, but no glow came through. Nobody wanted to step back inside, so we picked a direction downhill and walked. No trail, no markers, just pushing through brush and hoping. It was silent. No birds, no insects. The deeper we went, the more it felt like the woods were closing in. After 3 hours, we hit a road, just cracked pavement and a tiny gas station with a flickering open sign, even though it looked abandoned. We stumbled in, scratched up and exhausted. The guy at the counter asked where we'd come from. Eli said casually, "Cabin rental up the hill." The guy frowned. "There aren't cabins up there anymore. Not since they tore them down, 15 years ago." We didn't answer, didn't ask questions, just looked at each other. We got back in the car and drove straight home. I was 27 when I decided to spend the summer alone near Linwood Ridge, a stretch of hills far out in the Blue Hollow Range. A friend of mine, Nate, had mentioned this old rental cabin he'd found online. He said his cousin stayed there once, said it was dirt cheap, remote, and barely on the grid. He talked about it like it was some forgotten relic in the trees. But what stuck with me was the way he described the quiet. "You can hear yourself blink out there," he said. I laughed at the time, but later, that line stayed in my head. I needed space, both mentally and physically. Life was loud work stress, city noise, and a vague, growing pressure I couldn't explain. I felt like I needed to hit pause, and that cabin sounded like a reset button. When I looked it up, the rental page was bare, one blurry photo. 2 lines of description: cabin in Blue Hollow. Basic amenities: secluded. The price was so low it made me suspicious, but I booked it anyway. The drive took me through towns I'd never heard of, past shuttered gas stations, rusty mailboxes on leaning posts. A diner called Ella's. I regret not stopping there. By the time I turned onto the last stretch, a dirt road with no name and plenty of potholes, my phone signal dropped to 0, not even a flicker. I remember pausing, holding it up like an idiot just to make sure. Nothing. The quiet was so deep I felt it in my teeth. The cabin sat at the end of that road like it had been forgotten. Smaller than I expected, one big room with a kitchenette in the corner, a bed, and a dresser that leaned slightly to the right. The bathroom was so narrow I had to wedge myself sideways just to close the door. The porch faced dense woods that stretched endlessly. No fences, no nearby houses, no power lines, just trees swallowing everything. For the first few days, it was perfect. I woke up early without an alarm, made instant coffee on the hot plate, sat on the porch with a blanket and a book. Around mid-morning, I'd hike the trail behind the cabin down to a slow-moving creek. The water curved around the ridge like a ribbon. Sometimes I waded in up to my knees, letting the chill sink into my skin while bugs skated across the surface. It was simple, grounding, almost meditative. I wrote in a cheap spiral notebook, sometimes pages, sometimes just a sentence. I even cooked a few decent meals: eggs, canned soup, a questionable grilled cheese that ended in smoke. The peace felt earned. But around day 10, little things began to shift. The trail was the first. I knew that walk to the creek, but suddenly it didn't behave. Some mornings I reached the water in 5 minutes, like usual. Other days it stretched on, as if more ground had been added overnight. Once, I checked my watch. It took 40 minutes before I heard the creek. I stood on the bank, confused and uneasy. The trail was straight. There was no reason for it to change. I tried to be rational. Maybe I moved slower than I realized. Maybe I stopped without noticing. To test myself, I stacked a pile of flat rocks at a curve in the trail, 5 or 6 stones. When I came back up, they were gone, not scattered, not knocked over. Gone. Another time, I snapped a twig low on a pine tree, bending it downward. When I returned, maybe 20 minutes later, the branch was whole again. No break, no splinter. I even touched it. It was the same spot, same tree. The bark rough under my fingers intact. I told myself solitude was messing with me. Too much silence and your mind makes noise. That's what I figured. Then the cabin started acting up. It was small, not much to keep track of, but I began waking in the night. Not groggy wide awake, heart already racing, like my body knew something I didn't. One night I heard it. A soft sound on the porch, cloth brushing against the screen. Not a tap, not a tear, just a slow, gliding scrape, like someone trailing a jacket along the mesh. I sat up, staring at the door, though I couldn't see through the screen. The noise stopped the moment I noticed it. The next morning, I stepped outside. That's when I saw it. The porch door was latched. From the outside, I froze. It was a simple hook latch you couldn't reach unless you were out there. I never used it, had no reason to. But that morning, it was hooked. I stood for a long time, just staring. Then I unlatched it and opened the door, half expecting someone to be hiding in the trees. Nothing, just still woods. But my hands were cold. After that, the trail got worse. One day I walked a loop I'd memorized. Instead of coming out at the trailhead, I stepped out at the back of the cabin. Another time I tried to head north and found a clearing I swear hadn't been there before. 3 blackened fire pits sat in a triangle, each one surrounded by scorched stones, some still stained with ash. I walked in circles, searching for footprints or trash, anything to prove people had been there. Nothing. When I turned to leave, the trail was gone. Trees had filled in, no path. I had to push through branches just to get back. The next day, I couldn't find the clearing again. At that point, I was done. I told myself I'd leave early, pack my things, left the essentials out, bag by the door. I'd sleep one more night, then leave at dawn. But that last night, I was on the bed zipping my bag when I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy, deliberate. One step, a pause, another step, as if someone wanted me to hear. Then the door handle turned, not fast, slow, almost polite. It clicked twice, like someone testing it. I didn't move. Every part of me froze. The handle stopped. Silence stretched. I listened so hard I could feel blood pounding in my ears. Then, after maybe 20 seconds, footsteps again, this time moving away. Down the porch, back into the woods. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys, stuffed what I could into my arms, and left. Didn't check the windows, didn't turn off the light, just locked the car with shaking fingers and drove until my phone found a single bar of signal. I didn't stop until Pine Creek. Parked at a diner for 2 hours before I could bring myself to order coffee. That was 5 years ago. I haven't been back to Blue Hollow. When people ask about the trip, I just say it was quiet. I was 27 when it happened. The trip had been something we talked about for a while. Me, my cousins, Jamie, Miles, and Danny. We all lived in different cities by then, and it had been years since we'd managed more than a rushed weekend or someone's wedding. So when Jamie found this listing for a secluded cabin in the Appalachians, we jumped on it. A full week off the grid. Hiking, fishing, card games, no cell service. Exactly the kind of quiet we all said we needed, but never made time for. The photos made the place look rustic but solid. Weathered wood siding, a tin roof, a wraparound porch that looked built for beer and bad storytelling. The description said it was half a mile from the nearest neighbor, with trailheads right out back and a creek within walking distance. It checked every box we didn't even know we had. We booked it that same night. When we pulled up the gravel road and saw the cabin through the trees, it looked right. You know how some places just feel like they fit. It wasn't fancy, but it had personality, real charm. Like it had grown out of the woods instead of being built. The air smelled like pine and wet leaves, and the silence was so thick it felt heavy. We stepped onto that porch like we were walking into another time zone. The first few days were perfect. We'd crash hard every night after hiking miles of trail, then swim in a creek so icy it made your bones ache. We grilled everything we could justify grilling and made stupid bets over who could hold their breath longest. Evenings were spent with cheap beer and card games until the lanterns burned low. No internet, no cell signal, and we didn't miss it. But on the third morning, something odd happened. Not dramatic, just off. I woke up before the others and went looking for my boots. I'd left them by the front door, muddy, still unlaced, exactly where I'd kicked them off the night before. Except now they weren't there. I found them outside, sitting neatly in the gravel driveway, side by side. Laces tied together in a tight little bow, not sloppy. Symmetrical, precise. At first, I laughed. Weird enough to feel like a prank. Over breakfast, I called them out. All right, who decided to get cute with my boots? Blank stares, a couple of shrugs. Jamie looked up from his coffee. What boots? My boots, tied together, in the driveway. Danny snorted. That's creepy. Miles just said, not it. They all swore they hadn't touched them, and I believed them. It wasn't their style. I brushed it off, told myself maybe I moved them and forgot. But that knot, it stuck with me. Too clean, too intentional. Later that night, we heard the thud. We were cleaning up after dinner, dishes clattering, a beer cracking open, music playing low from a little solar speaker. Then, from above us, this heavy noise, like a dropped box or something slamming into the loft floor. The loft wasn't in use. 2 bedrooms were downstairs. The loft was basically storage. Just a beat-up mattress, some crates, and a narrow window that was painted shut. The listing even said not to use it. Something about unsafe floorboards. Naturally, I grabbed the flashlight. The others went silent as I climbed the ladder. The air up there was stale, unmoving. The mattress hadn't shifted. The crates were untouched. But the window, wide open. The paint that had sealed it shut was chipped away, and the wood around the latch was scratched. Like someone had wedged it open with something flat. No storm, no wind. Just that window, hanging open like it had been forced. I didn't say a word when I climbed back down. I think they saw everything in my face. Jamie had the worst night after that. The next morning, he looked awful. Pale, dark circles, twitchy. Tired in a way a bad mattress doesn't cause. When we asked him, he hesitated. Then he said, "I heard someone walking around my bed." We froze, not outside, in the room. Slow steps, like they were circling. I didn't open my eyes. I just waited. Then it stopped. He said it like he was still trying to believe it himself. And Jamie isn't dramatic. He once drove 6 hours with a broken collarbone because he didn't want to be a hassle. That day, things got stranger. We found a kitchen knife halfway down the hill behind the cabin, stuck in the dirt. One we'd used for slicing apples the night before. The firewood we had stacked neatly was now arranged in odd little towers, like someone tried building with them. Then came the chairs. We usually left them on the porch facing the trees. That evening, they were gone. We found them around the fire pit, arranged in a tight circle, like someone had set them up for a meeting. None of us had moved them, and the fire pit hadn't been used in days. I didn't even ask. I just dragged mine back to the porch. That night, I locked the front door, checked it again 10 minutes later. Deadbolt clicked in, handle turned tight. The next morning, the door was wide open, not just unlocked. Standing open like someone had swung it wide and walked in. And right inside the doorway, on the floor, was a perfect circle of river stones. Smooth, flat, and wet, still smelling of the creek. Arranged in an exact ring, each one touching the next. We stood around it, none of us wanting to touch them. Jamie muttered, "That's it, we're leaving." But Danny shook her head. "It's weird, yeah, but maybe it's a prank. I don't want to bail just because we're a little freaked out." The vote was split. Finally, we agreed. One more night. But if anything else happened, we were gone by sunrise. Right before sundown, Jamie shouted from the yard. We ran out. He was pointing at the trees. Hanging from a low branch 6 feet off the ground was our cast iron skillet, the one we used for eggs. Dangling from a piece of rope we'd never seen. The handle looped perfectly, the pan swaying. No wind, but it rocked gently, creaking as it moved. The handle turned slowly, catching the last of the light. No one said a word. We just started packing, silent, like we'd all agreed without speaking. "Grab your things, get to the car. Don't forget the keys." We threw bags into the back, half unzipped. Miles left behind a cooler of food. I lost a jacket. None of it mattered. We just wanted out. We didn't speak until the trees thinned and the road turned to pavement. Months later, Jamie told me something he hadn't said that night. Just before he called us outside, before the skillet, he'd been looking at the trees. He said he saw something. A figure, pale, still, standing between the trunks, watching. It didn't move, didn't run, just stood there, like it had always been there. I haven't been back to the Appalachians since. We had been planning that summer trip for months, half out of boredom, half out of desperation. We wanted to do something that felt real before life started pulling us in different directions. It was that strange in-between time, after high school, but before anything else had really started. College was looming for some of us. Others weren't sure what came next, so the idea of disappearing into the mountains for a week with nothing but each other, a cooler full of junk food, and no cell service, sounded perfect. There were 5 of us crammed into 2 cars. Jordan drove an ancient Honda with 1 working speaker and no AC. Lex had a truck that barely made it uphill, with a dent in the passenger door that no one ever talked about. Milo and Danny sat in the back of the Honda with me, our feet tangled in snack wrappers and blankets. The playlist was chaos, half old 2000s emo, half random tracks Jordan's little sister had downloaded. But nobody cared. We were too busy laughing at inside jokes, passing around gas station gummy worms, and cheering every time we lost GPS. The cabin came through one of those sketchy word-of-mouth recommendations. Jordan swore it belonged to his cousin's friend's family, and it was super chill and basically free. Those were the only selling points we needed. We saw a few photos online. It looked rough, rustic in the way horror movies pretend cabins are charming. The porch sagged, the wood was graying, and the whole place looked surrendered to time. That was part of the appeal. If we were going to vanish for a week, it felt right to do it somewhere that looked half forgotten. The drive out was endless. Roads got narrower, potholes deeper, and the trees leaned closer, as if whispering to each other. Cell service dropped to nothing near the last gas station. After that, it was only gravel under the tires, and nervous glances whenever the GPS rerouted itself again. By the time we pulled into the clearing, the sun was sliding behind the ridgeline. The sky glowed a burnt orange, and the air felt heavy, as if the woods were holding their breath. The cabin stood at the edge, ivy curling up its sides, boards warped and sagging. A swing on the porch moved just enough to catch our eyes. We brushed it off as the wind, though none of us remembered feeling any wind. Nobody said it, but we all felt the same thing stepping onto that porch. This wasn't just an old cabin. It felt untouched, like time had passed around it instead of through it. Inside, the air was thick, musty, not just like dust, but like memory, as if something had been waiting there a long time. That first night was typical. Cheap beer, a fire crackling. Jordan retold his goose story from 5th grade. Lex tried to teach us a card game none of us cared to learn. We laughed too loud, trying to ignore how the trees pressed close beyond the firelight. Places like that make you notice the spaces between sounds, the quiet between the cicadas, the snap of a single branch. No cars, no barking dogs, no sign of anyone else nearby, just us, like the world had thinned out, leaving us in a pocket no one else could reach. The second day, we hiked down to the creek. The trail was overgrown, and Lex slipped on a mossy rock, swearing while Milo tried not to laugh. We swam for hours, shouting against the stone walls, dunking each other until our voices gave out. For the first time, it felt normal again, like maybe we were just being paranoid. We came back sunburned and starving, burned half the hot dogs over the fire and called it gourmet. That night, exhaustion swallowed us whole. It was the third morning when everything changed. I was the first one awake. The stairs creaked as I climbed to grab my hoodie from the hall, and that's when I saw them. A pair of boots. Big, old boots. Leather cracked like dry earth. Dried mud crusted around the soles. Heavy work boots, the kind you'd expect on a logger from the 1940s. Not in a cabin full of broke college kids. They weren't ours. I knew that immediately. Nobody had packed anything like that. We barely remembered towels, and they were placed too neatly. Side by side, lined up with care, like someone had taken them off at the door. I stared for a long time, trying to convince myself I'd just missed them before, but I'd been up and down that hallway twice. They hadn't been there. I didn't tell anyone. Maybe I should have, but saying it out loud felt like it would make it too real. Later, everyone else went back to the creek. I stayed behind, claiming I wasn't feeling great, which was true. Something about that cabin made it hard to breathe. I dozed on the couch, half dreaming. That's when I heard it. Upstairs, slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps, not creaks, not settling wood, real footsteps. 5 steps, pause, 3 more, another pause. Like someone was pacing the hallway, thinking. I waited for someone to call down. No one did. Silence. Eventually, I forced myself upstairs. Every stair groaned like it was warning me. The hallway was empty, and the boots were gone. That night, I told them everything. The boots, the sounds, how they vanished. They believed me. I saw it in their faces. Even if they didn't want to admit it, they believed me. From then on, the boots came back, every night. Sometimes outside our rooms, sometimes at the top of the stairs, once in the kitchen by the back door. Always neat, always deliberate, never moving while we watched, just appearing. Some nights, we heard pacing above us. Other nights, boots scraping across the porch. Slow, even, stopping right outside the front door. No one opened it. By the last night, we were wrecks, silent, sleepless, shaking, fear like static under our skin. We sat by the fire until morning. When light finally came, Milo stood without a word and went upstairs. We followed. We knew where he was going, the smallest bedroom. Inside, it was nearly empty, a broken bed frame, a cracked window letting in thin morning light, but the dust on the floor told the truth. Footprints, one set, large, deep, circling the room, over and over. The same path, worn smooth, as if someone had been walking that room for years, never stopping, just looping, waiting. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. We packed in silence. I carried my bag straight to the car, slammed the trunk, climbed inside, and when we pulled away from that clearing, I never looked back. I was 19 when I said yes to spending the summer in the mountains with my cousin Caleb. His family had this weathered old cabin tucked way up in the Appalachians, really up there. Not the kind of place you find on your average GPS. It barely showed up on maps, and even then, it looked more like a smudge than a destination. The drive itself was a whole thing. First it was highways, then back roads, then even smaller back roads. until eventually we were on a one-lane gravel path that twisted like it hated us. Trees pressed in so close on both sides that you couldn't tell where the forest ended and the mountain began. At some point, my phone lost all signal. No texts, no bars, nothing. It was like the world decided we didn't need to be part of it anymore. Caleb called that freedom. I called it being cut off. Either way, once we crossed that invisible line where modern life stopped following us, everything felt different. Caleb kept driving like he'd done it 100 times, like muscle memory. I just stared out the window, trying not to feel like we were being swallowed. The cabin itself was, well, it was a cabin. One of those places that looked like it had been standing just a little too long. The wood siding had gone gray, and parts of the porch sagged under our weight, but it held. Inside, it smelled like dry wood, dust, and something faintly metallic. Like old tools left in a shed for too long. The shelves along the kitchen wall were packed with mason jars, pickles, peaches, tomatoes, and things I couldn't even identify. Most had dates scribbled in faded ink. Caleb's dad had done the canning years ago, back when they used to come up every summer. That first evening, while we were unpacking, I noticed a hand-drawn map tacked up above the dining table. It was on yellowing paper, like it had been there forever. Someone had sketched the hills and valleys around the cabin in pencil. You could see the outline of the property, some trail markers, and a few notes in tiny, cramped handwriting. Some of the trails were clearly marked. Others had been scribbled out so hard the paper had nearly torn through. I asked Caleb what that was about. He glanced at it, shrugged, and said, "Dad says those don't go anywhere, just old logging roads or something." He said it like it was nothing, but the way he looked at the map again before walking off stuck with me, like maybe he wasn't so sure. The next morning, I went behind the cabin to check out the trails. 4 paths split off from a clearing. 2 of them were overgrown and hard to follow, but the other 2? Those were clear. Worn paths with packed down dirt, broken branches, even the occasional footprint. They were the ones scratched off the map. At first, we didn't mess with them. We stuck to the marked routes, fished in the creek, hauled firewood, tried fixing shingles that had peeled off during storms. In the evenings, we played cards by lantern light because, of course, there wasn't any electricity. Caleb was fine with it. I tried to be. For a little while, things were easy. Then one afternoon, we were hiking back from the river and figured we'd take a shortcut. Caleb swore this ridge would drop us right behind the cabin. He'd walked it before, he said. I didn't argue. It seemed straightforward enough, but halfway through, things got weird. The trail began to fork in ways that didn't make sense. First one split, then another after that. Each fork looked almost exactly the same. Same arrangement of rocks, same little clusters of ferns. I stopped at one and said, "Didn't we already pass this?" Caleb looked around, confused, like he wasn't sure either. We kept going, thinking we'd loop back to the cabin eventually. And we did. Kind of. The cabin was there, same clearing, same trees. But something was off. The porch, which had always faced the gravel drive, was now facing the woods. Like the whole building had turned while we were gone. I thought maybe we came in from the other side. Maybe we circled around somehow. But the front door was still in the same place. I said that out loud and Caleb didn't answer. He just walked past me and went inside without a word. That night I woke up to knocking. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more. Slow and deliberate, not fast or frantic. I figured maybe Caleb had gone outside for something, but when I looked over, his bed was untouched. Sheets still folded. He hadn't even been in it. The knocks came again, fainter this time, like they were coming from farther away. I got up and followed the sound outside, barefoot, heart pounding harder than I liked. The forest was dark, but I could hear the knocks, leading me. 3, pause, 3 more, always just ahead. Eventually, I found myself at this rotted fence I'd never seen before. It ran along the slope, disappearing into the woods in both directions. The posts were warped, some broken, and the wire had rusted down to thin coils. I reached out and touched one of the posts. That's when the knocking started again, but from underneath me. Not ahead, not behind, beneath. Like someone was down in the ground knocking on the bottom of the forest. I turned and ran, didn't stop until I was back inside with the door locked. Caleb was already there, sitting at the table with a flashlight and a bottle of water. When I told him what I'd heard, he shook his head and said he hadn't heard anything. After that, things started piling up. Little things at first. The lights in the woods came next. They weren't flashlights, they weren't lanterns, just glowing squares. like windows suspended in midair, floating between the trees. Some nights there were one or two. Other nights there were more, lined up like houses along a street, but no movement, no noise, just cold, steady light. I pointed them out to Caleb. The first time, he said it was probably campers. But we never saw tents, never heard voices. No fires, no gear, nothing. Just the lights. A couple of weeks in, we took one last hike together. It was supposed to be longer up over a ridge, then back through a loop. We packed lunch, brought extra water, even took the old compass off the shelf just in case. But the higher we went, the stranger things got. The soil changed first. It went from light, dusty clay to thick black earth that clung to our boots. It felt soft underfoot. Too soft, like walking on moss or memory foam. Then the plants started changing. Taller, darker, crowding in on the trail. The air grew heavier, like everything around us was leaning in, listening. At some point, we realized the trail behind us looked nothing like the one we'd come up. Caleb pulled out his phone, but the GPS froze. The little blue dot showed we were still back at the cabin, at the table. No matter how many times he refreshed, it didn't change. And then came the knocking. 3 sharp knocks from the left. Pause. 3 from the right. We both stopped, listening. "It's just woodpeckers," Caleb whispered, but even he didn't sound convinced. The knocks came again, closer. One set from the left, one from the right, like they were calling to each other, or surrounding us. We didn't speak, we just ran. Downhill, crashing through branches and ferns, scraping our arms and faces. We hit the creek and didn't stop, shoes soaked, feet freezing. But the cold felt real, grounding, and we clung to it like a lifeline. It took hours, but we made it back. The second we stepped into the cabin, Caleb went to the map, ripped it off the wall, and threw it into the fire, watched it burn like he hated it. After that, we didn't go back outside, not for more than a minute at a time, even then, only during the day. At night, we stayed up with the lanterns burning until they hissed out. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps on the porch, slow, careful. One step at a time, circling the cabin, like someone was checking each window. But when I opened the door, there was never anything there. On our last night, I couldn't sleep. I stepped out onto the porch just before sunrise, wrapped in a blanket. The air was dead still. No wind, no bugs, nothing. I stared out toward the edge of the clearing, where the scratched-out trails began, and that's when I saw him. A figure, right at the tree line, standing still, holding something. A lantern. The light swayed slowly, left to right, left to right. It wasn't fire. It didn't flicker. It was too smooth. I blinked. He was gone. At first light, repacked the car. Didn't eat, didn't speak, just drove until the trees thinned out and cell service came back.